So, okay, so there was some technical issue today. I think it's working and we can progress. So we were looking at in the previous satsang, we were looking at the verse number 37. And in the verse number 37 and 36, we were discussing about how the sadhaka graduates to higher and higher levels in the sadhana. And there were certain tips, there were certain advices by the Shastrakara how to sort of move forward and what are the issues. First, in the 35 sutra, they mention moho pratisangatastu karmatma. So once you get deluded, once you are trapped and sort of retracted back into the wills of karma, and if you sort of, even though you are going to a higher level, if you reconnect with delusion, reconnect with false beliefs, then you're back to square one. That is what they mention. And then immediately he says, we have had a long discussion, so I'm not re-entering into that. Because of the gap, I'm just trying to do a very quick rehash so that we remember the context. Then he's saying, even if that happens, then the sadhaka, bheda tiraskare sargantara karmatvam. So at the same time, the guy who otherwise appears as if he becomes a karmatma, means he is again deluded. If he's able to sort of dislodge, eschew, uh, thrust away all the bheda buddhi, the dualities, and then confusing the phenomenal reality as perfect reality. If you're able to do that, sarira pranadi ahanta abhimanat manah vedasya tiraskare. So if a person identifies with the body and stuff like that, he's having a mind which is trapped in dualism. And then if he's able to get rid of it, tiraskare chidghana swabhava unmajanat. And then that self-awareness, that purity gets restored. You do a kind of restart of the computer. So you're kind of restoring your purity. Apastine sati, when that happens, sargandar karmatvam. He gets all the powers in the world to recover his spiritual, his occult energies, his powers, literally not to be taken, essentially saying yatha vilasita nirmeya nirmatritvam bhavati. So whatever he wants happens. What does it mean? That he is able to again re-enter into that swatantriya, that sovereignty. He re-enters, he's back in the groove. It's like, as I was mentioning, it's like a sports person who's suddenly out of form and then he reconnects. He just plays one match, he reconnects, and he's back in his groove. So he again starts playing as if nothing has happened. That is what happens with sadhaka. It's quite possible, and if you look at the biographies of a lot of people during that sadhana dasa, you look at the life of Swami Vivekananda and commentaries and personal notes and journals of many spiritual leaders. There is this state in Christian mysticism called dark night of the soul, where suddenly you lose sight of God, that divinity. We have stories about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Jagannath temple I was mentioning. He would go and hit his head against a particular place, a particular piece of stone. And a lot of people go and touch it as a sacred mark. And then there would be moments when he would say, I'm Lord Krishna, what are you looking for? So he sort of reobserved into that supreme universal consciousness. Therefore, there is no yearning and there is no craving, there is no dissatisfaction, there is no sense of unfulfillment. All these things are sort of flushed out of your consciousness, and that happens bheda tiraskare. And then he's saying in the verse number 37 that we had done, Karana Sakti Swato Anubhavat. Nacha etat nirmeya nirmatritvam asya asambhavyam yataha swataha swasmat eva anubhavat sankalpa swapnado karana sakti tat tad asadharanartha nimnartitvam atmanah siddhameva. Then he's saying that, how does it happen? And there was this mention that we have already discussed in the last satsang. There is this moment of anugraha of the teacher or the acharya or God. So if a person is kind of becoming a little wayward, the sadhaka, you might suddenly experience a flash of divine grace and you're back on track. There could be a shocking event, outwardly a painful event, because God wants to pull you back on track. He might give you some, he can give any of us some kind of a disenchantment, some kind of a mild depression, some kind of a loss, or whatever. At a very mental plane, I'm telling you, at a very deeper spiritual plane, actually changes are not so evident, because there it's like the surface of the ocean can be appearing very stormy, but if you go deep down, it's still very stable and quiet. Similarly, what happens outwardly with a person may not necessarily indicate what is going through spiritually. And he might appear very calm outside, and yet there could be spiritual struggle within, because it's a very uh, it's not a journey free from any hassle. There are a lot of ups and downs, and in Christianity there is something called dark night of the soul, where you get disconnected with, and there's also a state called wrestling with God, where you are kind of trying to hold on to your faith and you are not being able to believe. You have loss of faith, you have loss of your spiritual temperament sometimes, all sorts of things. There's a feeling of separation. It's like a lover who is disconnected from his or her beloved, and therefore he has tremendous pain, emotional pain, and wants to reconnect. And then if there's a reunion, you are back in a sense of bliss. So Karna Sakti Swato Anubhavat, and it's kind of is mentioning that the way a person wishes, it sort of happens in a very natural, spontaneous way. Because and we have already discussed that, so I'm not entering it. Then in the verse number 38 and 39, we would be told about some sadhana tricks. When you have traveled so far and you have done a lot of spiritual progress, and there could be a few one or two minor setbacks, and there are risks involved. How do you go to that ultimate stage of Videha Mukti, that ultimate stage of complete non dual unity? There's nothing to unite with at the ultimate level. You meet your friend, you meet God, you meet your children, you meet your boss. There's a meeting because there is some kind of a difference, there is some Veda. But at the ultimate stage of that spiritual realization, there is no devotee and God. We're talking about that non dual consciousness where there is no difference anymore. But how does that happen? How do we manage to engineer that through our sadhana? And where does the role of a sadhaka comes in? Of course, there is Ishvara Anugraha. Of course, there is Prarabdha. But then the Shastra, if there is this discussion, what about our spiritual freedom? Do we actually have spiritual freedom? Because there's so many theories about, everything is kind of predetermined with a prarabdha, and then you have sanchita karma and agami karma. Where is freedom? You have this powerful karma siddhanta. One critical thing to remember is that if there is no freedom, all the shastras will become anarthaka, it's waste of time. Why should we be reading if there is no relevance of all this? If there is nothing to do, if there's nothing to work on, there's no need for us, in fact, to be wasting time on these spiritual scriptures and then trying to meditate and do some sadhana. There's obviously room for some initiative, some sadhana. That is why there is advice, even Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So we just have to accept that there is a Vishwanyanta, that there is a Ishitara, there is this supreme sovereign Lord overhead, and he can do anything. That means we don't need to do anything? No. then Shastra will become completely Shastra Anarthakya Prashangat. Bhagavan Bhashyakara again and again says that all scriptures will become meaningless if there is no freedom, if there's nothing to get, if everything is predetermined, and we are slaves of these whole game of consciousness in different forms. What is the point of Shastra? There is no need for these Vedas and Upanishads and anything. He sort of hammers that point into the minds of all we need to. Of course, in Christianity, for example, Jesus says that you move one step, I move 10 steps. If you look at the Bhakti literature, the same thing. Now, here, this is a very, very mystical path of sadhana. And there would be a few things that I would mention today, which might be a little confusing for you as to why should they be mentioning about all that. There is a bit of mention about, reuniting with God. Might say that, it sounds like Osho Rajneesh, but what he's trying to say is it's very similar, and we'll go there. Some commentators have mentioned. It's like, you have that sense of bliss when you are with a woman, or, there's conjugal happiness. There is absolutely no thought. There's a moment of bliss, right? Now, union with God is no different. Union God with, in fact, even more intense. As an example, we are taking that, not to be confused with it, but there's always room for a lot of misinterpretation, and you have a lot of Freudian and new Freudian analysis, and you have a lot of enthusiasts who would like to beat you down using these tools to say that, look, in your literature, all these things are mentioned. So there's a lot of sexuality in the name of spirituality in your literature, people might say. So we got to be very careful as we are moving forward on this particular thing. Tripadadi Anuprananam. So you have these three states, Susupti, Swapna, and Jagrat, or reverse way, Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti. Tripadadi Anuprananam. So briefly what he's saying, Trayanam, uh, this, so Sthiti, Sthiti, Laya Sabdoktanam, Bhava, Onmukha, Tad Avishwanga, Tad Antarmukhi, Bhavana, Mayanam, Padanam, Avasthanam, Yadadi, Pradhanam Anandaghanam, Turyakhyam Padam, Maya Saktyachitam Api, Tattad Vishaya Upabhogadi Avasareshu, Vidyud, okay, Vidyut Vad Avhasamanam, Tena Anuprananam Atmanaha Uttejanam Kuryat. Now, first, this is the, the britti, okay. Now, I will just make sense of it. Let's make sense of it. So you have these three states, Srishti, Sthiti, and Laya. You have Jagra, Swapna, and Sushupti. Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, Sabdoktanam, those states which are referred to and explained by using the words Srishti, Sthiti, and Laya. Bhavonmukha, then what you have, that object orientedness in your consciousness. So let's imagine what is Srishti Sthiti Laya in our everyday lives. You have a workshop and you have to make a presentation, you have to write a paper, you have to build a house, you have to do a project, you have to have a birthday party. It will have all these Srishti Sthiti, you have planning stage, you have execution, you have some post. So you always have this Srishti Sthiti and Laya in the materiality of these whole phenomenal existence. These three words will come. There will be a beginning, there will be some period of continuity, and there will be a point of termination. Bhava and Mukha Tad Avishwanga. So first thing is that you're oriented towards material objects. Material doesn't mean physical objects. Material objects can be anything in samsara. Tad Avishwanga. And then therefore you have curiosity, you have attention oriented towards that. First you have your consciousness is moved towards that. So there is some general disposition. And because of that disposition, you have associated cravings, desires, aspirations, good way, bad way, whatever. Okay, that is Avishwanga, is a kind of attachment. And then tad antarmukhi bhavana mayanam. And then what happens? You also sort of internalize these objects you are looking for, and then you are attached to. They become a part of your consciousness. You may not have them. Like in a very positive way, like Swami Vivekananda used to say, take up an idea, take up a dream, make it a part of your life, and then you sleep it, you eat it, you live with it, you dream it, right? So whenever you have this powerful, that's the positive way to look at it. But if you look at our everyday lives, whenever your mind is oriented towards any material object, which means that is non-self. That's not in a Vedantic way, okay? Now you know that in Kashmiri Saivism, it's not a complete rejection of the material world. It's in fact a complete acceptance of the material world with Shiva consciousness at the center of focus. You have that supreme divine consciousness at the center of your focus, and therefore you're connecting with the details and you are not losing anything. You can connect, that's not a problem. So what happens is that mukhi bhavana mayanam. So therefore you have assimilated it, you have made it a part of your life. Okay. Padanam avasthanam, and then you have these stages. Okay, that is what is mentioned. Padanam avasthanam yad adi pradhanam anandaganam. What is the beginning of it? It is that Turyavasa, the fourth stage. Yad adi, and that's the master, isn't it? So in your house, what is the most important corner? Drawing room, kitchen, bedroom. You might think bedroom is the most important place, but a lot of people will say no. The sacred altar where you keep your whatever spiritual images. If you're a Christian, you put Jesus, or you would have the picture of Mecca, or you would have picture of some Hindu gods and goddesses or deities, whichever way, or some picture of Guru, whatever, the sacred altar where you sit and meditate. That is what he's saying. That adi, that pradhanam, what is important? Pradhanam ananda ganam, that is that turyavasa, turyakhyam padam, maya satya achaditam api. Now, the whole question we were discussing today in one very beautiful text. If jiva brahmiva naparaha, Bhagavan Bhashyakar says that again and again. Brahma satya jaganamaya jiva brahmiva naparaha. The sansara is delusional. What is real is Brahman. And what about me? No, you are also Brahman. Jiva Brahmiva Naparaha. You are not different from Brahman. You think you are a human being, and that's the root cause of your anger, your anxieties, and everything. But truth of the matter is, Jiva Brahmiva Naparaha. The moment a person says that to you, I remember long back when we were students, and there was this famous professor in Delhi University. Ramu Gandhi was apparently making some presentation on Vedanta, a fantastic brain. And there was one student, he says, now you had your lunch and you have come to present a paper at the seminar, but I'm a student, I have missed my lunch, I'm hungry. How do I fill my stomach? How do I benefit from the fact that this Advaita, I don't take it? And he just said that, he gave a very compassionate, cunning answer saying that if you are hungry, how can I be full? But that is at an ethical level. That is not the message of Vedanta in a certain way. There would be phenomenal inequalities and conflicts are not denied. Quarrels, differences, moments of love and moments of aversion, these are not denied. The quietitude at the bottom of the ocean doesn't deny stormy surface level of the sea. We are talking about the foundation of our consciousness. And we are saying that if we can go to that foundation, that is the surest way out of this rumble in which we are trapped. We are not denying this whole samsara is completely delusional. Delusional relative to what? Delusional relative to that substratum, that pure supreme consciousness, which all of us are. Therefore, the question he's saying, if actually we are that, why are we thinking we are deluded. What is the root cause of our suffering? Therefore, he has to give an explanation. He's saying, Maya Satyajit Achaditam Api. Yes, I recognize that, the Panchakritya, five energies and powers of Lord Shiva, the Supreme Consciousness, is you have Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, creation, sustenance, and termination. Then there are two important aspects of his divinity. One is Tirobhava, the other one is Anugraha. He is the one who hides reality from us because of our karma. We are bad guys. And he is the one who lifts us up because we are good guys. So, what differentiates when we are good, when you are bad? It's all about our aspiration and what we are looking for and how we are reorienting our consciousness and our conduct in life. And we are rewarded or punished depending on how we are moving forward. Therefore, he's saying here, Maya Saktya Achaditamapi. Even though this Maya Shakti of the Lord, just imagine Shuddha Vidya is liberating and then it becomes Maya Shakti that's deluding. That's one energy. It plays two roles depending on at what level and who we are, what is the nature of our consciousness. Therefore, he's saying Maya Satya Achaditamapi Tattada Vishaya Upabhogadi Avasareshu. So, even though you are experiencing life, sadness and happiness and excitement and depression, all that we are passing through, and there would be moments in which avasareshu vidyudvat abhasamanam, that self-awareness will flash in your minds once in a while. I'm telling you, this is most reassuring sutra, by the way. For all the vicissitudes in our lives, there's so many ups and downs that we are passing through. You must have yourself experienced. There could be one stranger, a god sends his energy or her energy in innumerable ways. It could be just you're very depressed, or you're not very happy because of whatever factors, and you're in the tube, or you're in a bus, or you're going somewhere in a garden, and then maybe a stranger, maybe a beggar, maybe your taxi driver smiles and tells you one sentence, and that sentence may have been actually told to you by the Lord Supreme or by the Goddess Supreme. You never know. Or forget about these mediums. It might just flash on its own. You may go to sleep and you may see a dream, or you are sitting and suddenly it flashes. You remember something, and then suddenly you are reconnecting with that lost glory of your self awareness. And you know what is the simile or what is the metaphor he's using? Vidyudvat abhasamanam. That self suddenly flashes in your consciousness like it's a lightning, it's a moment of epiphany. Abhasamanam tena anupranam atmanaha uttejanam kuryat. He says, oh, really? If that happens, then you know that there's God's grace in favor of you. Don't let it go. In the sad part is that we actually let it go. And you will also see that in your everyday lives. The day you had a wonderful meditation would be the day you go to office and you might have an altercation with your boss or a colleague, or somebody is standing too close to you in the tube, you feel very uncomfortable. You might exchange a few heated words and lose that. That's a test that we are put to every day. But it's quite possible that you have that flash, a beautiful recovery of that glorious sense. It looks like as if we are all manic depression patients, that we would have a continuous state of sadness or distraction and stuff like that, and suddenly we are feeling very good. And that's what happens to a person who is having mood swings, or you have bipolar disorder. No, that's not what it is all about. It's not about bipolar disorder. This is about a person who suddenly remembers where is the key. He remembers where he has actually money, or he has that book that he was looking for. He has that purity of his consciousness very much in front of him. And then he's saying, don't let it go. If that happens, don't let it go. What do? Tena, that means that vidyudvat avhasanena chaitanyena turyakhyena, that fourth state of consciousness, that is the turya avastha, which is beyond jagrata, swapna, and sushupti. That fourth state, the moment you have a connection with, don't let it go. It's like a young student who is doing his post graduation. You remember our student days, and then suddenly there's a bright professor who comes, and you just accidentally ask a question. He gets a little impressed, and then you run to him and say hello because he wants to talk to you. You see a possibility of an academic exchange. You want to talk to him, you want to hear more from him, and you'd be finding students coming to you once in a while. These things do happen. So he's saying, similarly, don't let that beautiful moment of spiritual regeneration, which has suddenly set into you, don't let it remain a temporary event. Extend it. What is that extension? Anuprananam, uttejanam kuryat. Excite all those associated energies. There was some teenager who came and he absolutely is a rationalist. And then there was his mother wanted some puja to be done, so he had to be a representative for his own sister. So he did that puja for his sister, who joined him on WhatsApp or whatever. And I saw that this boy, after he finished his puja, who is otherwise very non-religious, very philosophical and rational, he says, "So Swamiji, can we go to that ashram?" I said, "For what?" "No, we could also do darshan and could meditate a little." I said, "Really? You want to do that?" He says, "No, because 5 hours I had to sit in front of this fire and do yajna and stuff like that. And suddenly I feel that I could do a few more things because my mind kind of behaves in a different way today." That is anuprananam. And then of course you would go back, like for example, you are in a spiritual retreat or you do satsang and all that, and then we read a book and we feel spiritually very, we have that psychic pleasure, a moment of bliss, and then we're back in the table, your table in the office, you're back into the samsara, and then slowly these things do evaporate. Therefore, the advice is uttejanam kriya, to excite all of the associated energies in you, which will sort of take you in that direction, which is part of your aspiration. Now, let's go into the interesting Siva Sutra Vimarshani of Kshemaraja. And first, sorry, we would first look at, as I do, the Krishnananda Sagara, who simplifies it, then we'll go to Kshemaraja. What is the simple way in which he's explaining it? Yasmad evam karnasakti pada prakathanena. Yasmad evam, because he's his own experiencing can happen, that particular thing is can materialize. Chidananda turyatma bodhatmanaha pramatmuhu saramasti. That bodhatma, that you're a bundle of energy, you're a bundle of consciousness, and then you are the pramata, you are the knower. Saramasti tasma, therefore, so maya sakti tirohita tat swarupa uttejanartham aha. It's a beautiful thing. You know what he's trying to say? So maya sakti of whom? Lord Shiva. Just see, it's his Sakti, and the game this Maya Sakti plays is in fact to hide that pure Shiva consciousness from us. That's it's like our own mental energy takes us in a different direction from our intended destination. Whose distraction? I had a very beautiful conversation long time back. Those days, you had those online chat rooms. You had different kinds of Yahoo chat rooms. I remember I was having this religion and spirituality chat room long back, 25 years back almost. And it's a very funny event in which I said these things do come. And the other person, I don't know who she or he was, and he says, "What do you mean by these thoughts come? Come to whom? And who responds?" You are trying to externalize things by saying these things do happen, as if you are not doing anything. It's end of the day you. And that's the beauty of it. Therefore, he's saying Swamaya Sakti Tirohita. This is obliterated by that Maya Shakti which is working through us, and that's we are not different from Lord Shiva. So Maya Shakti Tirohita Tat Swarupa Uttejanartham. Tat Swarupa, that Atma Swarupa Uttejanartham, to reignite, to bring it to the fore again. They're saying Tripadadi Anuprananam. So you try to sort of, earlier also we had done that principle, how to practice spirituality. You have to sprinkle that Shiva consciousness. You have that Turyavastha, Trishu Chaturtha. So you take that fourth state, pure Shiva consciousness, and irrigate your waking state, your dream state, and your sleep state. The starting point is Jagrata Avastha. In your Vijnanamaya Kosha, you do meditation, you try to transform yourself. Slowly, the Manomaya Kosha, the emotional seed, also gets transformed. You behaviorally change. And then that gets into your dream state. You would also be dreaming, in which you see yourself as the spiritual aspirant. You are not radically different or opposed to what you aspire to be in the waking state. And then that same power of that spirituality also trickles down, percolates, and transforms the unconscious, the deep sleep state. Therefore, he's saying, So Maya Sakti Tirohita Tat Swarupa Uttejanartham Aha Tripadadi Anuprananam. Ataeva, therefore, Ayam Yogi Janaha, therefore the Sadhaka Yogi Janaha, Drida Bhavana Vasad, because of that powerful resolution, Vasad, Swapna Sankalpena Tulyam, Sujanatmaka Sujanatmaka Karyam Sampadayati, because he's mentioning that Sargantara Karmatvam, that he can create anything. How does he materialize? How does that happen? That is explaining that because of that powerful resolution, he's saying Drida Bhavanavasad, meditating on it. Bhavana is essentially meditating on something, It's generally in the Upasana Koti, Bhavana. You are, or there's a word in Vedanta called Prashanshana in Yoga Sutras also, meditating on it again and again and again, and creating that association in the mind, so that there is some kind of a transformation through that habitual association with it or contemplation of it. But here it's different. Bhavana Vashat, Swapna Sankalpena Tulyam, the way we dream things, similarly, the sadhaka materializes, manifests his spirituality. Srujanatmaka karyam sampadayati anena, through this swatantra karana samarthyena, by his own independent sovereign power, jagrata swapna susuptakhyam avastatrayam dharanam kritva anupraniti. And then what he does, he takes hold of his own waking state, his dream state, and his deep sleep state, and he starts transforming them by sort of sprinkling this pure consciousness, okay, on the states which we have done that sutra earlier. Yadyapi, even though chamatkara rasa Sachidananda Ghana Rupa Turyakhyam Padam Maya Saktya Achaditam Asti. Even though that Turyakya, that fourth state, which is Sachidananda Ghana Rupa, that truth, consciousness, and bliss, it's there, but we don't see it, we don't feel it. Why? Because it's covered, it's wrapped in ignorance. Even though so, tathapi, even then, Tattad Vishaya Upabhogadi Avasareshu, even though in the waking state or dream state or in deep sleep state, you have some connectivity with some pleasure. In dream, you see a lovely dream. In the waking stage, you are watching a match, or you're going on a holiday, whatever. Within those things, in between them, he's mentioning that Vidyudiva, as if it's a flash of lightning, Abhasamanam Bhavati. That Turiya, that fourth stage, suddenly materializes in your consciousness. Tena anupranam swatmanaha samyak rupena uttejanam kuryat. And make use of that resource of a moment of epiphany, a moment of spiritual realization, or just a flash. Make use of it. Reconnect. You went to a temple and you prayed a little. Every day is not the same. Many days you'll go to the temple or the church or whatever. You go, pray, and you come back. You don't feel anything. And there are dates, there are moments when you go and you suddenly enter into a very deep psychic level. That is what he's mentioning that happens. And in case that happens, don't let it go. Make use of it, expand it, make use of it in order to excite those similar energies in other parts of your brain to ensure a fuller total transformation. That is what he's mentioning. Now, the Kshemaraja, as I was mentioning, that there's a few apparently sort of confusing statements, and we would be looking at them. Yatasya karna sakti sabdoktya turyatma, that whatever is mentioned, that turyatma, Swatantra Sakti Reva Bodho Rupasya Pramatu Sharam, that Swatantra Rupa Sakti, Bodho Rupa, that is the real essential nature of the Pramata, that's all of us. Ataha Maya Sakti Apahastita, the Swarupa Uttejanaya, whatever is kind of covered up by ignorance, it's like you have a lot of money in cryptocurrencies, you have not remembered the password, so you look for it and you try to recover it. Then you are rich. If you forget it, you are poor. It's like that. Therefore, he's saying, Trayanam bhavonmukha tad avishwanga tad antarmukhi bhavana mayanam. We have already discussed these three aspects. One is a kind of a mental orientation towards this material world where you find happiness and pain or whatever, and you're looking for some. And then you have a few specific attachments or curiosities or interests. And finally, you internalize it, you assimilate it, it becomes a part of your consciousness. Srushti Sthiti Laya Sabdoktanam Padanam Avasthanam, and you have that Srishti Sthiti and Laya. You have waking and dream, and you have deep sleep states. These are the words through which we narrate all our attachments, Avasthanam. Yad Adi Pradhanam, the one which is most important, that Tri Chamatkriti Tvena, because this fourth state, that sort of transforms. It has this magical powers. Anandagana Turyakhyam Padam, Maya Satya Chadidamapi, same as all commentators saying that even though it's wrapped in ignorance of the mind, Tattad Vishaya Upabhogadi Avasareshu, even then when you are connecting with the object of pleasure during your waking or dream or the deep sleep state, Vidyudvat Avhasamanam, this self-awareness flashes like lightning, Tena Tattad Avasareshu, and then in those moments, opportune moments, when that happens, Kshanamatra uditenapi, even though it arises in your consciousness only for fractions of a second. You might go to the temple, you feel blissful only for a few seconds. Kshanamatra uditenapi, even though it happens, you hang on to that, you hold on to that. Anuprananam, you extend it, you spread it over. Antarmukha tad vimarshavastita avastiti taratyamyena anugatataya prananam. Depends on your vichara, and then how to make use of it, how to connect it, how to expand it. And atmanah tena eva jivitenapi jivitasya uttejanam kuryat. Now that energy which enlivens you, you see, that energy is what enlivens us. And then we, as enlivened, we are trying to expand those energies. You might say there is a kind of anonyashraya dosha, the kind of regression. A depends on B, B depends on A. No, you have to have an imagination of some kind of a series. So, whatever he said, there's a beautiful sentence. He's saying, "Jivitena jivitasya uttejanam kuryat." By making efforts, you have these energies expanding, and you try to expand them. Thus, Taduktam Sri Vijnana Bhairave. Now there are a few slokas which are interesting with a bit of scope for confusion, therefore we'll look at them in Vijnana Bhairava. Antah Swanubhavananda Vikalpa Unmukta Gochara Yavasta Bharitakara Bhairavi Bhairavatmana Tad Bapus Tat Tato Geyam Bimalam Vishwapuranam. Now, what is that Maya Shakti? And what is he saying? That Vairavi Shakti, Antaha Swanubhavananda Vikalpo Unmukta Gochara. You have Sankalpa, Vikalpa, these are the dualities, distractions, and you are all over. but actually you are absolutely free from that. That is that state of that consciousness. Yavastha, that which state, Bharidakara, that stage is called Bhairavi. What is that Parama Bhairava? Bhairava, that is that Bhairavapatti state, right? That in the first chapter we did that Sambhovapaya, that you would become a Bhairava in that supreme consciousness where there is no duality, there is no Bheda Buddhi, there is no distraction, and you are fully at one with the supreme universal consciousness. Therefore, that energy of that supreme consciousness is called Bhairavi Shakti. Bhairavi, Bhairavatmanaha. This Bhairavi Shakti of whom? Oh, the one who is Bhairavatma, the one who has that Bhairava Swava. Why is he called Bhairava? He flashes away all your fears. And then he's also frightening, he's the most powerful one. Therefore, he's saying Bhairavatmanaha. Tad Bapuhu Tattvatvo Yeyam Bimalam Vishwapuram. And then that is the Swarupa. Tad Bapuhu Tattvatvo Yeyam. And how do you know it? Where do we meet this Bhairava? Tattvato Giyam. You don't go and meet him. He's not physically available anywhere. You can call him, you can sing prayers and this and that. That's for purification of the consciousness. But Tattvataha, it's only through Vichara that you get him. Giyam, Bimalam, is free from any impurities, free from any dualities. Vishwapuranam, and that's all pervading. Okay. Iti ityadi upakramya, starting with that, Sakti Sangama Sanshubda Saktya Vasanikam Yatsukam Brahma Tattvasya Tatsukam Swakya Muchyate. Now, look at this. It sounds a little controversial. What he's trying to say is that when a man unites with a woman, and then they are having a copulation, okay, so in the copulation, so they have this pleasure, and he's saying that ultimate moment, hmm, there is a state of avesha, there is a kind of a spell, and there is a human being, there's another human being, but he or she is only incidental to that state of bliss. What he's trying to say is that particular presence of a person has at best some instrumental value. You know why he's trying to say this? There is a deeper intention behind saying this. What are you trying to say? Yasukam Brahma Tattvasya Tatsukam Swakya Muchyate. And in fact, he's comparing that with Brahma Sukha. What is Brahma Sukha? Is there any duality? Is it dependent on you going to a temple or connecting with something or eating something? Some people experiment. You remember that Roads to Freedom? No, some book by Aldous Huxley, who mentioned, and then Carlos Castaneda and all, they have mentioned about um, the role of psychedelics in expanding your consciousness. Some people did a lot of experiments in the 1960s. No, we are not talking about that. That is not what is Brahma Sukha. It's that supreme non-dual consciousness where you start with some kind of a dualism in the practice, but ultimately even that meditation on the Brahman or Vichara, they all drop. What remains is that unified pure consciousness. You're not looking for anything anymore. We're talking about that. And he's trying to sort of compare that with the bliss which is experienced by the subject participating in a conjugal union with a partner. Now, he's trying to say that this actually has nothing to do with the girl. Why? He's saying, I'll give you some reasons as to why I'm saying this. Lehanam anyatha kotehi sti sukasya varasmritehe saktya bhavepi devesi bhavet anata samplavah आनंदे महति प्राप्ते दृष्टेवा बांधवे चिराद आनंदमुद्गतम ध्यात्वा तन्मयस तल लयो भवेत् जगधिपान कृतोल्लास रसानंद विजृंभणात् भावयद भैरवम भाव महानंदमयो भवेत्. So, the beauty of the Sastrakaras is that they will pick up some examples of everyday life. That is why there is some kind of reference to sex or food and meeting of friends. What is he saying here? He's saying, look here, okay, so there is a girl and whom you love, and there is a relationship, so you're experiencing bliss. He said, no, that's not true. Because there are quite moments where a person, that example is also there in Advaita Vedanta. He's saying a person who is a Bidura, his wife has died. The case of Nigamananda Saraswati comes to his mind. He was so desperate to meet his wife that he went to a lot of tantric gurus. He said, I want to meet my wife. She was young and beautiful, and he did a lot of sadhana to, and then he transcended it and he became an enlightened person. But then he was craving to meet her who was already dead. So a person can have a hallucination, and he might also experience conjugal happiness in a state of delirium. It's quite possible. It's quite possible that he might experience pleasure or happiness or blissful moments in a state of delirium because of that powerful aspiration or powerful yearning or craving. Where does he get the happiness if the happiness actually lies in the woman? Because she isn't here. That fellow is in tears that my wife is here, but the wife isn't here. That fellow is in tears that my daughter is here, but the daughter is actually dead. The dad is crying desperately for his daughter, and then he sees some other girl and he breaks down and he cries, and he recovers all the blissful moments that he has spent with his little baby daughter who has passed away. Now, this is the beauty of it, that even though sometimes we attribute our psychological states to external factors, they are in fact originating within. Therefore, he's saying that bliss that you're saying is outside, that's in a beautiful lady or a baby girl that he has lost, or maybe anything, maybe money, maybe house, maybe parents. They are actually not external. He's saying that state, that intensity of love or pain or whatever he's experiencing is deeply internal to him. And why he's saying this? He's giving few more examples. He's saying, do you know there's a person who is very old or he's poor? He cannot live in a luxurious house. He can't give it to a girl that he loves or wants to have a holiday there. But then he can strongly aspire for it and feels the enchantment associated with it. Yeah, you have a lot of poems written by good poets in old age where they are expressing their love for some women. They're physically not capable though. So he's saying Satya Bhavepi Devesi Bhavet Ananda Samplavaha. There is, profusely this experience of happiness can happen to any person. It has nothing to do with your physical and mental conditions. It has nothing to do with any external object. Both are denied. Then he is going, Anande Mahati Prapte Drishtevai Bandhe Vachira. Then you meet your old friend and he is coming. You have that pleasure, that feeling of happiness. And Ananda Mudgatam Dhyatva Tanmayat Talloyo Bhavet. And then you are lost in that moment of happiness. Maybe that friend has come to tell you something very painful, but then you are overwhelmed with a sense of happiness and bliss because you're okay. So you suddenly are sort of reconnected with that. And then he's saying, Anandamudgatam dhyatva tanamayas talloyo bhavet, and you're lost in that. Jagdhipana kritullasa, you had food and you had drink. You had your favorite dish or you had a very good drink. Jagdhipana kritullasa rasananda bijruvanat, and then you have expansion of that happiness. Bhavayad bhairam bhavam mahanandomai bhavet. He says, these are examples I'm giving. You try to expand that Bhairava Sattapatti, you expand that God realization. The source of all happiness, the intense feeling of bliss is in fact within us. And he's giving the example of a person who has lost his beloved, the way he craves and gets her, even though she isn't around. That is only used as an example. That's just being used as an example, because that is not Swarupata Prapti, because that's not no achievement. What is that? It's a delirious presumption that he is actually saying hello to his girlfriend. Nothing of that is there in reality. But he's using that as an example, saying that powerful yearning for something, because he's trying to prove one point, that real bliss is within. You have only incidental factors associated with it, like meeting an old friend, maybe a letter, maybe food, maybe drink, maybe a holiday. These are incidental to experience of happiness. Real happiness is within, and that real happiness is what we should be trying to realize. Yoginas tanmayatvena manarudhes tadatmata. And then he's saying, there's another example, he's saying, Gita di Visaya Swada Aswada Samasokyatatmanaha. Like, for example, a person is listening to a song or some music, and then aren't you sometimes you become tanmaya, you are lost in that. These are all examples given in order to encourage us to reconnect with that purity within, and that blissful experience is going to fall to place, it's going to material, it's going to manifest. Ityadina upaya pradarsanena prapanchitam. So therefore he's explaining atikriddha prahostava kinkaromi tiva mrishana dhavanama yat padam gachet tatra spandha pratisthitaha. When do you think if a person is God realized? He's saying God realization is like that. Sometimes you say, what do I do? He's standing here, he's running, he's kind of bewildered. It's like, it's like in films, you must have seen that in many soap operas and serials, where there's a guy, he was abroad or he had gone to the war or something, and that guy is coming to see his beloved. And the news has come that he's reaching in 2 minutes, and there's no food, the house is not properly arranged, and the family of the bride are kind of all over the place. That's what happens to a person who is suddenly inching towards God realization, the way it happens. Similarly, he's kind of in a state of excitement and bewilderment. When he sort of gets that supreme consciousness, it manifests in his consciousness. And he's saying, Etat spanda nirnaye nirakankyam mayaiva nirnitam. He's saying that, Kshemaraja saying, I have explained it to you in spanda nirnaye, you read it. Trishu chaturtham, in the 20th sutra, iti sutrena jagaradau turyanu uktam. Therefore, which is mentioned in the sutra number 28, is kind of being expanded here. Anina sarvadasa anugatadi madhyanteshu. So all the stage you have there, in the middle of them, Srushti Sthiti, Sanghara Nirupitaya Bhangya Nirupiteshu Iti Visheshaha. So all that he is trying to say is mainly the point that we discussed in the beginning. Okay. So Tripadadi Anuprananam. So you're trying to sort of take that supreme blissful experience. It might flash at certain awkward moments or certain opportune moments, but don't let it go. You hang on to it and you expand it and stabilize it. And then the next sutra is equally interesting. Chitta sthiti vata sarira karana vahyeshu. Now, it's an internal thing he mentioned, that internally try to expand it, isn't it? But it then says that you should be able to expand it not only in your psychological universe, which is within you, in your subjective universe, but you should be able to translate that into your exterior, which means your external connections in samsara, and how sort of you connect with things, you execute things. That particular anuprananam should also be visible. You should also take it outside of you. In the beginning, what happens? We are doing sadhana, so we keep it a secret from others and we do meditation. The main goal is, the laboratory is our mind, in our consciousness, our emotions, our body. That is the laboratory where you're working. Then Long after, slowly, these things become obvious to others that this fellow has changed. When you're trying to take it to the outside world, in the beginning, you cannot do it. If you do it, I mean, it's too much of a challenge. You need to protect it and nurture it, and then you become stronger, and then you take it outside. You try to also apply it, and that will be a moment where maybe you will not like to do your job, or maybe you would like to change things which are in direct conflict with your sadhana. He's saying chitta sthiti vat sarira karana vahyeshu. The way chitta sthiti, in that chitta sthiti, you are doing anuprananam, same way you try to take it through your indriya vrittis and also your body and your external interactions. Antarmukhayam chittastittu iva. Whatever is internally oriented in your state of mind, the way you are doing sadhana, iva sarira karana bahya bhasatmikayam. Whatever externally appears, bahirmukhatayam api, where you are in your bhuthana dasa. That means you are a man of the world, you're doing things. Bahirmukhatayam api tena turyena anupranam kuryat. You take that Shiva consciousness, the fourth state, and you try to temper first your Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti avastha, and then you take it outside and you temper your external behavior, your body, your emotions, their manifestation, and how you connect with the. How does he speak? How does he walk? As Arjuna was asking Sthita Prajna Shaka Bhasha, right? And Bhagwan has given some answers. So you also take it outside. That is what is the advice. But we have hit the timeline, and we will do the commentary on this sutra when we are meeting again on Saturday. So any questions, one or two, or we can. Is there any doubts? Any questions from anyone? Okay, so we'll do the Shanti mantras. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Tatsat. Have a good day. We'll meet again on Saturday.